Hi, we're Oxygen Conservation, and this is the Shoot Room Sessions. Hey Bex.
Hey Rich.
Welcome to the Shoot Room.
Thanks so much.
Can you tell people who you are and what you do?
Yep, I'm Bex. I am a trustee of Devonshire Wildlife Trust. I'm a digital nomad, and for work, I'm a freelance social media manager and a writer.
Super cool. So, career and kind of life to career contents, please. So, where did you grow up? How did you get to here? And tell it too long a story, because that's what makes it really interesting. So, give us the contents page and the chapters.
All right. Okay. So, born in Blackpool, which I was very excited to hear Derek mention on the podcast. Not with the most positive connotation, but
What did he say about Blackpool?
it's to do with Horace the elk.
Right. Okay.
He said something about some shoddy emporium, and I was like, yeah.
He was hugely rude about Norwegians, as I recall, as well. So, okay.
Anyway, I'll take it. I'll take a Blackpool mention any day. Mostly grew up in Leicestershire in the Midlands, and I think I saw that as some kind of heaven on earth. And looking back, it was basically an old colliery.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just the best place to be. It was the edge of the National Forest. It was reclaimed land. It was, low scale farming, and just a place where I could run and be with my friends and just walk through rivers and have
So all outdoor adventures was the sort of childhood.
And I think I was quite lucky because I was at that stage where, like, before smartphones and computers really started to proliferate. And I wonder now if that wouldn't be the case, if I would have got distracted into that. But anyway, so yeah, grew up in this, what I thought was the best place on earth, and realised that I wanted to also kind of save the earth. So Springwatch started showing when I was sort of early teens, I think. And I was like, right, I need to be one of these people that looks after this stuff, because I don't want it to go away. I want other people to enjoy it as much as I am. And so, being also an incredibly nerdy kid at school, the sort of person who's like, do all these extra subjects and extra GCSEs. So I was like, right, I'm going to do all of the biology, geography, environmental science.
Did you recognise you were nerdy at the time?
Oh God, yeah.
You did, okay.
Yeah. Which is hard because we were like a non-uniform school and college system. So, it's all very about looks. But anyway, so yeah, very much a nerd. And I did my first internship at the summer where I turned 16, so 15 to 16, went into an ecological consultancy, and I'd got some funding, and I was basically like, can you have me for a few months? I want to poke around in rivers and work out how to save this stuff. And they're like, yeah, sure. So that was really great. Shout out to EMIC, East Midlands Ecological Consultancy. And they're attached to Nottinghamshire Wildlife Trust. And so I got in with that team and realised that as much as I really liked prancing through fields chasing butterflies, which is definitely not just what ecologists do.
I think you might have hit the title of your podcast, Prancing Through Fields Chasing Butterflies.
Through fields, yeah. I mean, it's fun, but also what I really liked was being in central Nottingham and talking to families, talking to kids, talking to people of all ages about wildlife at a very different level of what I was used to. People who didn't know what an oak tree was or didn't know what a blackbird was, and I was really happy doing that kind of...
So it was introducing them to it that you were getting the excitement from.
I just really enjoyed just chatting to people. And that for a nerdy kid is also a bit of an awakening. So I was like, oh, I don't have to be like silent and shy. So that was a really good experience. The following summer I got onto Oxford University's unique summer school, which is like, sorry you go to a bad school, you're probably quite clever, come to the uni for a bit. Which was really, again, a lot of fun. I think my favourite bit is we had to do a fancy dress on like the final night, and you had to dress up as something beginning with U, N, I or Q. And my dad helped me dress up as a quad rat. And it's just still to this day, best costume I've ever had. But so that was really good. Did a lot of like geography stuff there. Realised that academically geography wasn't that interested. And so I was feeling like a bit lost. Was coming towards the end of my A-levels and was like, right, still think I want to go and save the world. So I applied to do biology at uni. Didn't get into Oxford, but I got into Exeter. And so, yeah, that was it. 18, moved to Devon and basically stayed there for the next 10 years. And yeah, then went into uni and work and stuff. So.
Okay, and so uni was kind of a longer form experience for you. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so throughout my life, I've had mental illness issues, and arriving at uni, that became the place where I, as an adult, required to do adult things. Like, I don't know, just be in charge of your own schedule and things like that. I realised that I really wasn't well. A lot of the adults around me, my tutor and people like that, realised I wasn't well, my friends. And so I got through about a few months kind of just getting through learning how to be a student, basically.
Well, and solo and an adult.
Yeah. And I think I didn't really struggle with the whole kind of like homesickness thing that a lot of people were having at that point. I felt happy, but also I wasn't well. And so what happened is I ended up going through the disabled students pathway. So I got diagnosed as having learning and processing difficulties on the educational side, and on the medical side, having depression. And so that was really good, actually, in the way that it helped me to realise what was going on.
Which is amazing that you got to that point as successfully academically as you had to then have that diagnosis.
Yeah, there was probably some signs along the way. I remember walking out of A-level exams and my teachers going, "What are you doing? Get back in there."
Yeah.
But no, it was really helpful to have that point, and it got to. So that was really helpful, is to have the disabled students support and to be in that pathway.
How did you find out about them, or vice versa? What got you to them starting?
It was probably the GP.
Okay.
So I actually have a GP on campus, which was really helpful, and they were able to know the system really well. And I think they must have worked with my tutor or something to say, this is something you need to do. So yeah, I got a lot more support, but then I got to my second year and was really struggling, and the doctor basically was like, I need to pull you out of uni. You know, I need you to focus on your health, not just your studies. I was also trying to work at the same time. He was like, let's pick one, let's pick your health, because if you don't, things are going to go a lot worse. And again, though it sounds like really negative, that was a really positive step for me. So I did what you call an interruption, where you basically leave uni for a bit with the intention of coming back. So I left in the November of, it must have been 2014. Stayed in Exeter, worked a bit, got better, started going to therapy, and then came back as a part-time student. And so that's primarily why my degree took so long, is because the rest of it was part-time. So a normal academic year would take me 2 years. So yeah, eventually after 6 years, I graduated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You talk about the positive steps that they were. Were you well enough to recognise them as positives at the time, or is that with hindsight looking back?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Probably with hindsight, I'm able to say that was positive. And there's also steps in hindsight that I would have done differently. I think there's definitely a version of myself that did not go back to uni.
Now that's an interesting sentence.
So one of the roles that I had in between one of these years was working at Devonshire Wildlife Trust as a comms assistant, communication assistant. And that was great. And I remember the uni saying, you need to come back now. This, you've got modules kicking in and stuff. And me being like, do I need to come back? Like, I'm quite happy in the workplace. I'd got a bit disillusioned with uni at that point. And so that was very much like one of those
Two junctions, yeah.
Yeah. But I went back, I finished the degree for better or for worse. And then carried on freelancing from there.
So if you had your time over, would you go to uni now?
No.
You wouldn't?
No, for me it was very important at the time to finish it. I think for me that was a vote of my wellness and my determination. But I think if I could go back to my 17-year-old self, I'd be like, just leave it. Give it a few years, maybe you might want to go. Because I studied part-time and the amount of financial help I got, my debt is massive and it grows a huge amount each year because of the interest. That's quite scary. I will never pay it off. So yeah, there's all these things to mull over.
How many people do you think you've been so far? Does that question make sense?
Yeah.
Because for some people it doesn't. If I ever meet someone and they say, "Oh no, I've always been this person," that scares the heck out of me, because I'm like, so you've never adapted, changed, or adjusted? Like I've been like 5 or 6. I'm nothing like the person that went to uni. I was largely unpleasant.
No, I mean I was a kid as well.
Yeah.
I mainly I remember going to uni thinking like, I'm not here because I think a biology degree is going to be the best thing for me to do. I'm here because I want to grow up, and I think this might be a good place to do it. Yeah, I think I'm very much a different person, probably to when we met maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I had a specific mental health crisis coming up to 5 years ago now, and I very much see my life as a before and after. And who I am now is very different to who I was before that. So I think there's that. I think there's also the version of myself who was living in one place, and as we were just talking a minute ago, I'm now not living in one place and traveling. So yeah, maybe 5 or 6 different people.
No, so let's dive into that bit. So you, so how quickly, in fact, we'll keep the career bit going. So coming out of university,
Yeah.
what did the job look like then to start with out of that?
Yeah. And so I'd been freelancing for a couple of years at that point. I had worked in social media management, event management, sponsorship management for a company called Rock Solid Race, who used to do obstacle course racing. Very cool. Big fan of that sport. And when the founder closed that company, I found that I missed it. And so I just carried on freelancing. And when I finally graduated, I couldn't see a job that I wanted. I couldn't see a job that was better than what I was able to create for myself.
When you thought about work, when you were either at school or uni, did you think work could be something you might enjoy?
No.
Because it never occurred. So my version of work, so my family all manual job. Dad was a builder, mum cleaned. From being a toddler, I was on building sites mixing plaster and shoveling stuff. Work was physically hard and unpleasant. Yeah. And I remember it's so cold that your hands didn't stop shaking for like 2 hours after you came back inside making plaster in winter. And I was like, work's going to be horrific. I'd never want to leave uni. And it only hit me probably doing a podcast the other day when someone was talking. I was like, oh yeah, it never occurred to me that work could be brilliant and fun. And I love what I do and I'm so fortunate. But for them, they'd seen their parents have jobs they loved, so they couldn't wait to get into the working world because they thought it could be great. It never even occurred to me it might be at the time.
Yeah. I mean, I think growing up, probably I was fairly fortunate in that case. So my parents both worked for local authorities. My mum was a teacher, my dad an architect. And I think they really enjoyed their jobs, that they worked very hard. They work long hours, and yeah, I guess and especially because as I graduated uni, a lot of my friends had already been graduated for 3 or 4 years, and so I'd seen them enter the workplace.
Yeah.
Seen them go into a difficult workplace, either along like a graduate stream that was not what they had imagined.
Who can tolerate the unpleasantness long enough to stay, and then
and I was seeing people be like, this isn't for me, and starting to give up on that workplace and come back and do PhDs or just try and figure out what the hell to do with their life.
Or stay in uni for a decade like me to avoid it.
Yeah, Rich. Yeah. So yeah, work doesn't necessarily seem like something that I could do. Also, just in terms of my health, I wasn't able to work full time, and this was I think now we've got more people accepting the idea of part-time work, the 4-day work week, which is something I do for myself, but I still feel like that's fairly new. And so when I was coming out of uni, I couldn't see many workplaces doing that kind of thing. And so I was just like, well, work isn't for me, the workplace isn't for me, so I'm just going to have to earn money and
build your own.
I know how. Yeah.
Which is all I love the right. Well, this doesn't work, so let's fix it and do it this way instead.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and then where did the involvement from a trustee perspective of Devon Wildlife Trust kick in?
Yeah, so as I said, I had my first kind of taster of the wildlife trusts in the Midlands where I'd grown up, and when I came to uni, I think I had this perception, and I've always had this perception as I've got older, that the next stage I'm at, that's when people will start taking life seriously. So like I was doing my GCSEs and I was like, okay, well, no one really seems to care. People are throwing chairs around the classroom, so never mind, we'll get to A-levels, that's when people will start to care about. And then that didn't really happen. I was like, okay, well, I'll get to uni, and then people will really care about what they're devoting their time and energy to. And again, people were just like, it's cool to like not really devote yourself. And so for me, I got to uni and I was like, but aren't we all supposed to be really into biology and the environment and like our new city and kind of really embedding ourselves? And I didn't really get that. And so I went outside the academic system for that. And so I went to Devon Wildlife Trust and I was like, can I get involved? I want to meet people who are into things that I'm into, the environment, doing stuff. And so I started volunteering for them like fairly early on as I got to uni. And that, I did work with the admin department and membership and communications, and then had that part-time role, and then did some local group, practical conservation. And then I saw an advert in the members magazine that said, we're recruiting trustees. And I was like, oh, that's fun, because I would sit at my desk and the trustees would walk by on their way to the big meeting room, and I'd be like, oh gosh, the trustees, they're really important, like don't look them in the eye kind of thing, as if they're sharks or something, I don't know. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if I could be like one of them people and really just like switch this narrative? And what really got me is that the advert had a number of bullet points that basically made me resonate with what they wanted. And so they were saying, we want someone who is young. We want someone who doesn't have a degree, which I didn't have at that point. We want someone, lots of different demographics that I could tick off. Low income, disabled, a woman, like things like this. And I was like, oh, there's me. So I applied. And yeah, after a couple of rounds, I got in, which was a huge surprise. But
How old were you at the time?
Oh dear, yeah, that's where I lose my track of time. So it's coming up to 6 years, and I'm 28 now, so I must have been 22. Yeah.
Yeah, you were the first person I ever met who was younger and the trustee. Did you realise you were sort of changing how things were done at that point?
I didn't until I was in, and then I was like, oh.
And was that when the board was principally all male as well? Because I know early on in Devon, I remember talking to Sue, the previous chair, that it was very male.
So Sue was on the recruitment, on the interview board, which I really appreciated. And I think it was Harry, the previous CEO, and maybe Penny, who's still on the SLT. So for me, I wasn't really aware of that split, and maybe it wasn't until I got into the boardroom that I realised kind of maybe the lack of diversity at that point. But also I was brought in with a group of 6 trustees, and many of those were women as well. So that was the first kind of rebalancing of the board.
Wow, 6 additional that's a big influx of new.
It was a big influx, and that's one of the reasons why we're changing the way we're recruiting now, to make it more rolling rather than influx.
So if you were giving someone out there advice now who's younger in their career or life and thinks trustee, that's just for a retired person, how would you respond to that challenge?
I'd say see where your skills align with what is necessary and what's needed out there. If there's a cause that you resonate with, there's no reason why you can't be a trustee. If you're an adult, you can be a trustee. That's, there's not a huge long list of qualifications that you need to have. A lot of boards will ask for certain skills or certain experiences, but some of the best trustees I've known have come in very early on in their career, and they're able to ask questions like, well, why are we doing it this way? Like, I remember coming into my first meeting and being like, oh, minutes of a meeting, that's like notes from the previous, why don't they just call it notes? Okay, so they're calling it meeting minutes, and just like learning these things like that. And I think coming in with that complete fresh mindset is so valuable, and more boards need to do it. So more charities are realising that as well now. So that's it.
And do you think you've gained from it and learnt personally from the process?
Yeah, hugely. I think one of the downsides of being self-employed is that you're not often in a group of people who are progressing and learning together. You're solely responsible for your own.
That's really interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way.
And so being in a group of people who are all joined in their commitment and are looking at this mission and these values together, and not necessarily agreeing all the time, but using each other as a springboard for ideas, that has been hugely invaluable to me on a personal and a professional level. Yeah.
Amazing. Why does diversity matter on boards?
Because boards should be good, and boards aren't good if they're not diverse. Boards are weaker if they're not diverse. I mean, just from a governance perspective, right? Like, a charity exists to serve its members and to fulfill its mission. And when you don't have a group of people who are able to think about things in different ways, then you're not going to meet that. You're not going to fulfill your purpose. You're not going to move towards your mission. And diversity is it's not just about recognizing differences, but it's also about celebrating them and sometimes using them and saying, okay, so you're coming from this standpoint, I'm coming from this standpoint. How can we look at this complex issue? And you don't get those different perspectives if you don't have diversity in all sorts of different ways.
So if someone's in a business right now and they're looking at their own board or team or group or whatever it is, and they think, do you know, we are so alike, so similar. What can they do to proactively encourage more diversity of thought and experience across a team or a board? What would you advise them to do?
I think the first thing to do is to look at why they are not diverse. What has the process been to get to this point? So a lot of boards have just recruited by asking the directors or the trustees, hey, do you know anyone good? And that's sure, that's one way of doing it, and that's the way that a lot of charities and a lot of companies have done it for a long time. But then you're just staying within your same pool. So if that's one reason why it might have got to that point, an undiverse board. So I think firstly is to look at the situation and ask why. And then the second thing I would say is to look at the barriers to having a more diverse board. And that's things like, I mean, I'll talk about it from like a personal perspective, but things that have helped me to access a board level discussion can seem fairly small, but are actually very important to me. So it was things like paying my bus fare when I asked for it on expenses. It was things like taking breaks throughout the meeting so that I could, move my body in ways that would limit my pain at that point. It was very practical things like that. For people with caring responsibilities, it's about asking, can we have provision for childcare during meetings? For people with processing difficulties, it might be, how can we make the papers more accessible? And I think it's very important for boards to do that work before they start trying to invite people in, because bringing people into an environment that isn't accessible or isn't welcoming to them, it's not only you're not going to get the best of them, but you're probably going to sort of do some damage in the process. And so I'm not saying hang around at those stages for very long. You want to start recruiting and you want to start aiming for diversity, but don't just aim for diversity because then you can say, I've got a diverse board. You need to do the work to get there.
The thing that really infuriates me when you see a tagline on the bottom of a job that just says, no, we're really diverse and open to everything, but no one's done anything about making it possible.
Yeah.
And they think by sticking a line in the bottom of a job advert, that's tick the box, done, we can walk away. And they end up still just recruiting people they know or have met.
Absolutely.
And the other thing I think a lot of businesses struggle with is they're really bad at recruitment. So recruitment is a skill, and we spend so much time, we're so, like Elle and Abby and Andrew, our head of people, do an amazing job in recruitment, and been really fortunate. We've had 2,000 applicants for 20 roles. For a startup, that's ludicrous, right?
It's not work.
It's exactly, which you have to invest in it, but then you get an amazing team as a result of it. Whereas if you like the amount in the public sector, I used to hear, oh, just get someone, get a warm body in, and it's like, okay, great. Well, you're going to love that, but in 6 months, you're going to be talking about how that person's no good and you need to move them on, and they're not having a great time, and the whole thing just doesn't work because that system's just destined to fail. But I think you make each recruitment, you need to build from and better and add one extra thing into your bow of your advertisement and your material and your reward and remuneration. And things like paying people's expenses and stuff is just an issue of showing them the respect and making it possible for them to contribute. Absolutely.
Yeah. I think something that we've realised is, so when I came onto the board, I can't remember exactly what started, but I basically started asking questions, and they were like, these are important questions. Do you want to start your own working group? I was like, sure, I don't know what those is, but yeah, sure. Ended up chairing the thing, which was a ride. And it's now a subgroup, and that work carries on in a committee, which is wonderful. Excuse me. But yeah, we started this different approach of recruitment that for me, I was very new to this, but I was able to be like, well, why are we doing things this way? Maybe we should try this. And I just remember it being really challenging and really overwhelming, actually, the amount of information. And not to kind of throw you in there, but I remember your application to being a trustee was a video. And we'd had, I don't even know, 60 or 70 applications to a trustee role. And they were all forms apart from two. So there was two videos, there was you and one other person. And that in itself was enough to be notable, to be like, okay, who is this person apart from how they can arrange words on a CV kind of thing. See how I agree recruitment's hard. I'm not doing it anymore.
So that story, and it's partly your fault and part Harry Barton's actually, because after coming out of the public sector, the last thing I wanted to do was go anywhere near a board of any kind or any sort of organised stuff. And you were talking to me, and Harry rang me and said, could we do some help, Rich? And I was like, okay. And then I think the next morning or something, I was at a project with Devonshire Wildlife Trust where we were helping them reintroduce beaver into wetlands area. It was like the first sort of inland beaver reintroduction project. I was like, right, I need to do this. So I recorded this video next to the reed bed of this beaver project. And I was like, look, I'm here with the Devonshire Wildlife Trust. Really love to help you doing this type of thing. And yeah, that was a really interesting process. So I would like to explore your digital nomad chapter. Take me through that incredible adventure.
Sure.
Why, to start with? What was the...
Well, this had been a thing for me for quite a while. So going back to kind of like pre-COVID, post me graduating, and I was freelancing. And I just remember like sitting in my room in January and being like, oh, it's kind of shit, isn't it? Sometimes January, it really can be. And like, why am I here? Why am I in England when I could be somewhere else?
I so want to release this in January, like next year with the January's sometimes a bit shit, isn't it?
It's a bit shit. And I mean, we're in February now, so it's easy for us to say that. Sorry, might have to cut that if it goes back later.
No, it's going to go out later, but we can say when we record it.
Okay, we're in February, everybody. Yeah. And so for a while I'd been thinking I want to travel with my work because I can. And like all of my clients have always been remote pretty much. Like I'll go to London occasionally to see people, catch up with people, or for meetings. But there's no reason for me to be attached to a specific place. I stayed in Exeter because I knew it and I built up my business there and I felt comfortable there. And so I started making plans. I saw there was a company called Remote Year launched about the same time that I started thinking about this. Very expensive. You pay someone to do it all for you. You go for a year, you remote travel, you take your work and you spend a month in each place and people go around the world and make great friends, but it cost a lot of money. I didn't have that money. And so I started planning my own version. And then life happens. I don't know, maybe people can get what I mean here, but kind of months go by or years go by and you're like, I want to do that. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it because I feel like I'm not confident enough, or I don't have enough money, or my business isn't established enough, or I'm not well enough. And then COVID hit. I was like, oh, I really missed the opportunity there. And COVID for me personally was very helpful. It stripped back a lot of things in my life that I probably needed to have stripped back. And so I did a lot of thinking over that time. And it remained a dream to be traveling with work, and I just never did it in COVID. And then after COVID, after a couple of years, me and my partner moved in together. We had a nice little house in Exeter near the quay, and the nomad thing had kind of gone to the back of my mind by then. I was enjoying my life, having a nice time, and we plucked up the courage to ask our landlady if we could get a dog, because she'd let us dog sit our friends' dogs, and it's very hard to find a rental that's pet friendly. But we thought, okay, she's up for it. Shout out to Donna, excellent landlady. Need more people like that in the system. And so we rang her in December 2022, I think it was. Yeah, and we were sitting on the sofa and we were really nervous. Well, I really hope that she lets us adopt these dogs. And we've done the terrible thing of where you pick out the dogs on Dogs Trust website. Yeah. Never do that. And she was like, yes, absolutely, you can totally get a dog. And we were like, oh. And then she said, but I need to tell you something. And we were like, yeah. And she said, I'm selling the house. I didn't want to tell you until after Christmas because I don't want to ruin your Christmas, but we're not keeping the house. We never really meant to be a landlady. I never meant to be in this system. And I've decided that I'm going to sell the house. So you can definitely get a dog, but you're going to have to find somewhere else to live with it, basically. And we were like, right, okay, that's changed a lot of things. So we thanked her and everything, and it was a great house, and she was very generous in that she said she would give us enough time. We would say when we would need to move out and when these things. So over Christmas, did a lot of research.
So was that Christmas? Was that all excitement, or was that worry? Or
this was worry at this point, because my partner had recently also gone freelance. And so we're both building up our businesses, feeling stable and safe in that place, and then being thrown this curveball and thinking, okay, we need to figure this out. And it was just at the start of the cost of living crisis, and it was just as Russia invaded Ukraine, things started kicking off and prices were rising, and we looked around at the rental market and realised that things were awful. Like, the housing crisis had only gotten worse. And this is Devon, and we, Devon and Cornwall especially are really under a lot of pressure.
So many people don't believe it. Those people
Really?
who don't interact with the rental market are just blind to the fact that that's a problem. They're just like, no, surely there's plenty of houses. But until you're in it and living and experiencing the process, they do not believe that there is an absolute shortage and a real challenge on rental properties. People refuse to accept it.
So the only way that we got this house before that we were renting from this lovely landlady is that we basically emailed the agent. We couldn't go because this was lockdown, so no one was able to view the property. We emailed her and we were basically like, we will do anything to have this. We can give you references, we can give you money up front, we will do anything we can. This is a bit about us in case that resonates with the landlady. It got us the property. And what we didn't realise until we came out of that is that, the market is awful, and we couldn't find a rental. We couldn't find an affordable rental. The ones that were just about affordable were awful quality, and the ones that were just about affordable and not awful quality were really far away from where we wanted to be for health system purposes and family support. And then we were like, right, okay, so renting looks really difficult. What about buying? I've been saving up to buy a house for the past decade, basically. It's been something that at the end of the month, if I have a fibre left, it's going in the LISA. And I just about got to the point where my deposit might be enough, and the same with my partner. But our freelance earnings hadn't been in long enough to prove that we could have that income. So suddenly we were in a situation where we couldn't buy and we couldn't rent. And so we were like, how about if we just don't have a home for a bit and give that a go? And my dream with traveling had never been to give everything up and go off and just not have any kind of base, but that became what it was, to do with, it's essentially housing pressure.
And are we still in the Christmas period? You're still having this thought pattern?
Yeah, so we came back in the new year to this house that we knew we were going to have to leave, and we decided kind of mid-January that we were going to do this nomad thing. And the only way we could kind of conceptualize it is by actually planning it out. So I was like, okay, what if we do some house sitting, and then we do a month in Cornwall, and then we go to a co-living space, and by making that practical plan, we could see that it was a possibility. So yeah, we sold all of our stuff and left in April.
Okay, and give us some of the quick stops along the way in terms of where you were and what you did.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people expect me to say, like, we went to Bali and Thailand. Like, nah, mate, we have not left Europe. So we spent a lot of time in Cornwall, spent a lot of time in short-term lets, holiday cottages like out of season that offer kind of winter let situations. We have spent time in Airbnbs.
I remember every time I'd check in with you, you would be in a different cool place having like an amazing adventure. So
yeah, so we spent some really great times in co-living spaces, and co-living as a concept, at least in the way that I talk about it, isn't necessarily entrenched yet in the UK.
Yeah, what does it mean?
So for me, when I think about like a proper, air quote, co-living, I think about a property that someone has grown up in and their family has left, and they now have a big property and they cannot make money out of it as a hotel or as a B&B. And so they turn to the digital nomad and the travellers community, and they say, come and live with us for a month or 2 months or 3 months or 6 months and be part of this place. Contribute to meals, to activities, and they turn into a business that is based on intentional community.
Are there many of those places? Can you find many of them?
Yeah, in Europe, yeah, and wider than Europe. But as I said, we stayed in Europe.
And in the UK?
In the UK, there are none that are all year round. There are some that say that they are co-livings, but are essentially like shared houses. So you have to commit to 6 months or a year. And there's at least one that operates seasonally. So here in Devon, we have Selgers. Very, very cool place. If you don't know about them, definitely go and check them out. and it's basically an old mill and an old farm, and over the winter they run a co-living, and for the rest of the year they run retreats and all sorts.
We had a big property on one of the estates that we were approached by a group of master's ecology students that wanted to collectively take this property in its current form, and it's livable, but it doesn't meet the standards required for a house of multiple occupancy. And this was a really historic building, and we were like, these people are great, it's a conservation project, we'd love to have them there, this is perfect, let's look at it. And in order to get permission to have multiple occupancy in it, they wanted us to rip out all the original fabric of the building and put in clinical fire doors and everything like this. It was going to cost 6 figures to allow these people to be there, and then the listing building control people said you can't do the things they want you to do anyway. So it was like,
yeah,
and I can understand, obviously you need safety and regulation, but in a world whereby there's not enough places for people to live, isn't there more pragmatism that could operate? Question mark. Don't know, not an answer. It's a question. We would have loved to have let them take that property, and there's a family there now, so it's actually worked out really well for what we were able to do, but at the time they were like a dream set of people to move there.
I wonder so I know quite a few people on the co-living circuit. You kind of get to know people who go to similar places around Europe, and people who have tried to set one up in the UK because it's a gap in the market. Myself and a number of other people have looked into bigger properties, looked into investors and how we could set this up. There are a number of reasons why it's very difficult to do in the UK, and building regs is one of them.
I think if you're a private landowner with a big estate, you can probably lean into it and go, I'm just going to do it, and it's exciting and interesting. But as a business, you wouldn't be able to make it work that way.
I don't think there's not a huge amount of money to be made necessarily in co-livings, but once the business is established and it's got a name for itself. So we stayed at Chateau Co-Living, which is 12th century castle in Normandy. Excellent place. We went there for a couple of months in our first year, and then returned last summer, and I joined as community manager. And these places really, they kind of encourage people inherently to care for the property and to care for the land it's on. And I think in that respect, there's a lot that conservationists and activists could gain from that communal kind of living. There are so many around Europe. There's Cactus. We stayed out on Tenerife. That was an excellent experience. There are so many on Tenerife. I think there's 14 or something now, just on that one island. Never mind about Fuerteventura. Never mind about Goma. Never mind about all the others.
It's really interesting. Something I know nothing about other than through your adventures. But now you've decided to settle back in the southwest.
Yes. So just before Christmas, we were me and my partner were thinking about how to live more sustainably personally. So how to feel like we're not always leaving, which is great for a certain amount of time and gets very tiring after a while. And the dream was never to be homeless. The dream was to see places and to work and find out what it's like in different communities. And so the ideal for us is to be able to afford a house and travel. I think that's going to be challenging, but we're giving it a go. We're buying a house in Devon.
Nice. So back in Devon, business still going. When you're trying to deal with the many multiple hats, all very cool, that you wear, how do you balance your energy and the time you need to commit to each of the different projects?
Still working on that one. Maybe it's always a case of working on it. I think something that I've picked up in the last few years is every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. And I know there's a lot of support for people who just say yes to everything, just do everything you can. And for me, that is a surefire way to burn out, especially if you have health conditions and you need to balance other responsibilities. And so for me, it's like every opportunity that comes along, even if I'm 100% yes, I want to do it, I remind myself what I'm saying no to by saying yes to that opportunity.
That's such a fascinating, because you don't have infinite time or resource, so you have to be consciously or purposeful with that choice.
Definitely. If you're in 4,000 weeks.
It's sat on the bookshelf, but I haven't got to it yet.
I actually travelled with that for a while because it made such an impact on me in the way that he's able to write about that concept. So I think there's definitely an intentionality around how I use my time and energy. And there are also some really practical things as well. So like I said, I work a 4-day week. There's a lot of research out there that suggests you don't get a lot more from working a 5-day week as opposed to a 4-day week. And from what I've read, that made sense to me. So yeah, I do not work on Thursdays. I mainly do client work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays, and my own stuff, my own business, admin and growth and things on a Friday. For me, yeah, being quite disciplined about those things, very important.
Why not the Thursday?
I have therapy on a Thursday.
Okay.
So that's, yeah, I start seeing my therapist on a Thursday morning. And what I hear from business owners who find it hard to take a day off is that they're transitioning from a place where they are always working into a place of trying to work less. And for me, an advantage, I guess, is that my base point is not being able to work a lot of the time. In terms of like, so I used to have chronic migraines, some chronic pain, fatigue and things like that. So I'm constantly trying to build my capacity. And so I have therapy every Thursday morning at 10:30. That just wipes out Thursday morning. Like, I'm not getting anything done before that, because if I do, I'm not going into the session with the right mindset. Afterwards, I need to lie down and just chill out. And then, yeah, I take the afternoon to do voluntary activities, things like this podcast recording, go on a nice little walk. You know, there's more to life than work. And I know we talk about this sometimes. But yeah, for me, it's also about recognizing that work is one part of myself, and that's not who I always want to be as well. My business works for me as it is and for who I am now. I'm in no way promising that I'm going to be running this business in 2 or 3 years' time. So yeah, it's about recognizing the things that will have a longer impact in my life, like therapy, like enjoying the natural environment.
Nice. You've written some interesting phrasing lately that I've noticed and wanted to dive into. Rule breaking to unleash the power of organic. What does that mean? So
this is a talk that I'm giving at some conferences in London. That's about the fact that, it's about organic social media. So there's that. Yep. So that's mainly what I do in my business, using the free tools out there to help businesses talk about themselves. I think there are a number of rules that people give themselves and that I haven't always given myself. And I think in situations where I have said, no thanks, I'm not going to follow that rule, it's often worked out really well. For me, for the client, for the work, sometimes for the industry as well. And yeah, for me, that's about looking at the rules that we give ourselves and saying, kind of holding them up to the light and saying, do I subscribe to that? And maybe we do. There are some things that are policies or approaches for a certain reason, but a lot of the standards that we set ourselves in society aren't necessarily for our own good or for business's good. And they're that way for a reason, right? Because it helps somebody get ahead in some way. But yeah, I'm trying to realize where I'm choosing not to subscribe to those things.
I love it. So, and this fascinating meeting the other day where we were looking at the business through a lens whereby 3 of the things we'd normally look at in terms of can an estate work economically, for this scenario, we weren't allowed to use anymore. So it made me go, okay, right. So if they've gone, what is this situation we've now got? And it came up with a completely different way of thinking about landscapes. And it was only possible because I had a set of forced constraints. And I've become recently really excited about this idea of creating those situations to cause you to think about different things. Now, I don't think you can do it to yourself. So I don't think you could take like 3 keys off your keyboard and make yourself write something, because you kind of know you've done it. Yeah. They weren't real constraints. But I think if we can find different and unique constraints, and we were talking about it before we started recording, there was the guitarist for the White Stripes, his producer, when they were doing one of their albums, used to change something about the setup of the room before he arrived every day. Like, he'd take a string off his guitar, he'd remove an instrument, or he'd put a noise in the background that he had to deal with and adapt to see what it produced. And I think it's really interesting how those constraints and differences are effectively taking away existing rules that were already there that maybe have no fit for purpose anymore, but causes you to think about things differently. I
think that's something that I've really benefited from being a nomad with. And so even if my view looking at the laptop is the same, I'm doing my emails, I'm doing social media, my background and my environment changes every few weeks or every few months. And yeah, how do I adapt to that? Who am I in that new scenario with these different people around me or in this different environment? And I think that has it's a really big part of creativity for me, actually, is introducing those different factors.
Yeah, I totally see that. Another phrase of yours was, after 9 years as a freelancer, this year's going to be more about learning by doing, relationship building, and pitching shamelessly. Where did that come from? What was the genesis for deciding this is 2024?
Yeah, I think the learning by doing thing was realising that over the past few years, some of the investments I've made in my business have been about learning things from people who say that they know what to do. And quite often I've entered into those spaces and found that, this is going to sound really big-headed now, but
Let it flow.
we're going to go for it. Either I already know those things or they are not relevant to me. And so I'm not necessarily learning by listening to how other people are doing things anymore. I'm learning by saying, let's try something differently. Let's do this in a different way. And so, yeah, that learning by doing thing is that.
So to contextualise that for people listening and watching, it didn't sound big-headed at all. No, and even if it had, we were laughing at the start about how you and I met, and you were a bit of an Exeter-based celeb when I moved down here, and you cringed horrifically at me saying that. I was like, no, that's not true at all, and it absolutely is true. It is true. I completely ascribe to the learn by doing and experiencing things, because take an opinion, take a guide from someone who's experienced it before. We just changed a piece of recruitment we're doing. So we were recruiting for estate managers, and every other job we'd done with a playful job title. So we'd asked for a head of storytelling or a terrain detective who's a drone surveyor. And we originally advertised for the governor of the first bank of natural capital, because on LinkedIn right now, there are 2,000 head of finance jobs. We advertised for frustrated accountant that wants to fight climate change, head of finance. But we took lots of advice from people working in the rural communities and sector, and they said, no, that won't work for estate managers. It's too different. You just won't resonate with people. It won't connect. I was trying to be respectful of that opinion and feedback, and we heard it so many times. I said, okay, we'll go with estate manager as the job title. And, we go from having 50 to 100 applicants for every role, more so for sort of intern roles and things like that, to very few. And I was like, so why are we so far away? And it was the only time we deviated from what was authentically us. So pivoted that, and we're going to relaunch the campaign. It'll have gone by now, but as professional adventurers, a video about what we're doing, about all the different adventures we've done in the team, and really ramp that up. And when we analysed how we'd got, it's exactly the advice you gave. We looked at how did we get to that position, and we asked people who were existing estate managers on historic estates. So we were asking their advice, and their vision was, how do I replicate what I'm doing here now, not what we want the role to be in the future? So it took us to really pare that back and now advertise for the spirit and authentically what's us, rather than what the people who've done it 10 times advised us to do.
But I think that's a really valuable learning journey, because you've tried what people have said, right?
Yeah.
And so I think when you're going forward and you're using something that's more authentically you, it almost engenders a greater belief in what you're doing, right? Because you've seen the alternative and it just doesn't work for you.
I put a piece out saying, look, we got it wrong. This advertisement was bad. We're going to do something completely different. It wasn't a job over. We didn't say there was a job. 5 people asked if they could apply for the job that we hadn't advertised. So we got more people apply for it on the we got it wrong than we did on the one we actually advertised. So it goes this weekend, and I'm hoping it gives us that. We're just trying to change the dynamic of what it means to be an estate manager. We're shooting for people who are passionate about the environment, like an adventure, and love speaking to people.
It's really interesting, because as you're saying that, I've got people popping up in my head, and I'm like, you know what, they would be really good for that.
Yeah. Would they look at an estate manager job?
No, and I would have never been like, hey, check out this estate manager job.
Like, you'd be an amazing estate manager, like in terms of the Elle's nodding behind the camera going, yeah.
Not just because I haven't got home.
You're going to get me in trouble for that one. I didn't even make the joke. But when you were first connecting with nature, you wanted to show people the landscape and inspire them as well. That's the job. That's the job. And that's a beautiful segue into the end of this. From the first time, before we even met, and I heard you talk about the Southwest and talk about the environment, you've inspired me, and you've caused me umpteen amounts of problems by persuading me to be a trustee and mischief in various board meetings. But it's been absolute pleasure to finally get you back to Devon and on the podcast. So thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Rich. It's been awesome.
Bye, guys.
Bye.